We all have an inner voice inside our heads that tells us when we didn't do something so well. And it's important to have this voice. Self-conscientiousness is not always a bad thing. It usually helps us orient us in the world and helps us recalibrate. For example, you really talk down on a person, and afterwards the voice inside your house tells you, oh wow, I really was mean to that person. That was not good. Then the goal shouldn't be to get rid of the voice. The goal should be to change your behavior and next time be nicer to that person. So this is what I want to clarify up front. Your inner critic, that inner voice inside your head, is not always bad. But what I see in a lot of people, and what was also the case for me, was that it turned pathological after a while. So I mean that the voice got overly critical to the point where it froze me instead of moving me forward. So here are some signs that your inner critic is too strong. First of all, you're constantly doubting yourself. Whenever you achieve something, you tend to attribute that not to yourself and your own achievements, but to external circumstances. You have this sort of imposter syndrome where you feel like you don't belong where you are right now, where you feel like you don't deserve to be where you are at in life. You crave external validation because you're not able to give that validation to yourself. You believe that you can't face new situations. You believe that you're not capable enough of changing your environments, of going into new situations. These are some signs that your inner critic is way too strong. So why is it that way? In order to fight our inner critic, we have to get to know him first. The inner critic is not just some mystical voice inside your head. It's actually a construct that you formed, mostly through just internalized norms, internalized values. And these can either be presented to you by society in general or by your parents, your caregivers, people that you were close to when growing up. And it's basically a survival strategy for you. So at some point, you learned that you have to be extremely harsh with yourself in order to survive in this world, that your probability for success is the highest if you really break yourself down internally and criticize yourself to the core. So this is often the case when you've grown up in an environment where love was conditional, where success was the only way that you would achieve, where you would get attention, where you would get some kind of emotional warmth. And when it is that way, you learn that you have to maximize the probability of success in order to be loved and in order to form safe attachments. Basically, this inner critic has once protected you from harm, because if you're extremely harsh with yourself, yes, you will break yourself down internally, but also, and this is also something that you have to consider, is you minimize the probability of upsetting everyone else. If you're so strict with yourself that you second guess every single thought you have, that you over prepare, that you only put yourself in situations where you're really sure that you're going to succeed, on the outside, this is perfect, And this is also why it's incredibly tricky to get rid of this inner critic, because people love people who are harsh to themselves. And this is horrible. Basically, this is called the fawn response. So when you grew up in an environment where you were put down a lot, where you were abused, whether it was emotional or physical, doesn't really matter, you learned to adapt. You learned to minimize your own needs. You learned to put other people's needs and other people's expectations above your own needs and expectations. And what happens then when you become an adult is you are completely governed by other people's needs. That so much that you don't even know your own needs anymore. You don't even know your own values. You don't even know your own goals, because you've spent your whole life adjusting to a version that other people wanted you to be. So the inner critic essentially helped you become a person who is perfect in the eyes of others. And here lies the problem. although you might be perfect in the eyes of these other people, and although this might have helped you survive through a difficult period in your life, it's not serving you anymore in your present life, because being completely reliant on external validation just makes you incredibly insecure and unstable, because external validation is literally something we can't control. We can't control how other people respond to us. Yes, you might have gotten very good at this, especially if you have shown this fawn response. People really get extremely good at sensing what other people want them to do, want them to say, want them to be, and then become that version. But what it's doing to you right now is it is essentially stealing your personality. It's holding you back from listening to your own needs, from being the person that you were meant to be. And this is also a vicious cycle, because it makes you, if you're so reliant on external validation and this external validation is so unstable, this will make you incredibly anxious and doubt yourself. And this is also something that happens when with the inner critic. So your inner critic constantly criticizes you, constantly tells you that you're not good enough, and tells you that you can only feel good enough when other people around you tell you that you're good enough, and then you don't get that response, this pattern and this underlying belief that you're not good enough is reinforced. So this is a vicious cycle. So you question everything you do, even when you win. When you win, you think that it was because of some external circumstance. This wasn't actually you doing the winning. You always try to find another explanation. You do everything to not have to believe that you're actually good at something, that you're actually might be a good person. So, and apart from the fact that you're miserable when you're always listening to that inner critic inside of you, this also has consequences on your health that are actually proven. So, it increases your risks for anxiety, burnout, and depression. It leads to learned helplessness, which is essentially that you don't believe that you can get out of a negative situation yourself. You always feel like you're a victim of your circumstances and you have no power to pull yourself out of there. And also, neuroscientific studies show that constant self doubt and constant inner criticism activates the brain's threat response system, so the amygdala and the insula, which increase cortisol and by that reduce your access to executive function, which is basically what you need in order to make decisions, in order to make plans. So it essentially turns you into an emotional wreck over time. And this just leads to more stress, to less confidence, and to deeper self criticism. So, this inner critic that was once formed to help you and to protect you is now holding you back and destroying you. It poisons you over time. So, how do I get rid of this inner critic? What do I do? This is incredibly difficult, especially if the inner critic has been around for so long. When you've gotten used to the inner critic and this voice that is constantly criticizing you, you might confuse yourself with this voice. But what you have to do in order to get rid of it is to face the fact that this is not you. These are other people's expectations, other people's opinions that you have internalized. And the only way that you can face the inner critic is by collecting evidence that he or she is wrong. So you have to actively, whenever your inner critic tells you, I'm dumb, I am lazy, I am unlovable, you have to come up with hard facts, with evidence that it is not this way. So the next time you doubt yourself, don't take that as evidence that you can't do something, but say to yourself, okay, I doubt myself right now, but there are A, B, Z situations where I succeeded. Why would I think that I will fail now? And even if I doubt myself, it's not so bad to doubt yourself, because this is also what your inner critic sometimes does. It even criticizes you for criticizing you. So it says, oh my God, I'm doubting myself again. I'm so weak. Doubt is usually not a sign of weakness, but it's a sign that you care. And it's a sign that you understand the complexity of a situation, that you understand the difficulty of a situation. So you need to attribute that in a positive manner. Also, if the next time you apologize to someone for being here or for having a need, for having a boundary, You have to tell yourself and you have to tell your inner critic, I deserve to be here. I deserve to raise my voice and to be a person of my own. If I'm afraid of a situation and if I think that I can't succeed in a certain situation because my self-efficacy is just extremely low, this does not mean that I will not succeed. It's just fear. It's just my emotional threat system and my brain is activated right now. And my inner critic is making me believe that I can't succeed in this situation. But this is not the truth. Fear does not mean that I can't grow. Fear is the training ground for success. Fear does not mean the absence of success, okay? So usually before your big breakthrough, you're going to be very afraid. And your inner critic always tells you, oh no, as soon as I feel fear, I can't go in that situation. This is way too unsafe. What if I fail? No one's going to love me anymore. No, you have to rewire that part of your brain that thinks that fear is always something bad. You slowly need to get rid of the need for external validation. And this is incredibly hard, especially if you've learned that you're completely defined by how other people perceive you. But you have to give yourself the credit. So, what has helped me there is to only set goals that I believe in, to base my goals on my own values. And in that way, I could also be genuinely happy for myself when I reached those goals. And I could genuinely feel proud of myself when I achieved those goals because I didn't set up the goals in the first place to please somebody else. And that way, your kind of reward, it gets way more stable because it's dependent on you and not dependent on other people, which will make you more confident. And this will be hard in the beginning because when you are used to treating yourself in a very rough manner, when you're used to hating yourself into doing things, being compassionate with yourself will feel disgusting. It will feel fake. But the beautiful thing about our brains is it always develops. So whenever you respond with compassion, you engage neural pathways. When you engage with compassion, when you show yourself compassion, even when you're failing, even when you don't get the external validation you wanted, even when you fail, and you tell yourself it's all right, it's okay, then your parasympathetic nervous system gets activated, which calms you down. And this basically gets rid of this fear response that is so prominent in people with a strong inner critic. Our brains are constantly learning, and you can teach yourself to treat yourself differently. So, what I'm trying to tell you is not to completely get rid of your inner critic, but you have to start leading it. Because when it starts to get out of control and rules every one of your actions, every single one of your moves, it really sabotages you and holds you back from achieving your goals and essentially keeps you from being happy, and it turns you into an anxious person that you don't want to be. So there's nothing wrong with feeling self-conscious sometimes. Sometimes it can orient us and it keeps us from being narcissistic assholes. But for a lot of us, the inner critic is just way too strong. And if you are compassionate with yourself over and over again, if you keep repeating to yourself that fear does not mean that your life is in danger and that you're not lovable, then you will actually start to change for the better. So I hope you guys could take something from this video, and I see you guys in the next video. Bye.